Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kyle Hoepner. I am pleased to be here with someone who doesn't really require a great deal of introduction, but I'm sure you are all very familiar with the work of Philip Mitchell, a wonderful designer from Canada. He splits his time between Chester, Nova Scotia, and Toronto. Should have been well known to us all for a long time, but I think probably to many of you came to recognition, personally speaking, in about the same time as with me, because back in about 2015, I started hearing from people I knew who had gone to the Kips Bay show house that spring. And they said, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, there's the most amazing stairway in this house. And some designer that we'd never heard of before has done this incredible art installation that goes all the way from the bottom floor all the way to the top. And it was, in fact, Philip Mitchell. Happily, I did get to experience some of Philip's work in person a few years later, in 2018, when he did another room, drawing room in Kips Bay, which was also, as you would expect of his work, beautifully layered and chock full of gorgeous stuff. And so I'm delighted to have Philip here today to talk with us. I will do another quick little introduction. First of all, I just want to thank all of the folks at Boston Design Week for making this possible, including Robert Four and Tony Fusco and their crew. I'd also like to thank Philip himself and the folks at Rizzoli, because obviously this talk is in conjunction with Philip's forthcoming book, and Elizabeth Blitzer of Blitzer & Company, who does PR. Before we get started, I will just sort of mention that we are going to be talking for a while, just sort of chatting about some of Philip's work and maybe something about the making of the book itself and how that comes about. We will have plenty of time for questions at the end of the session. And for that, if you would all please use the Q&A function, which is located down at the bottom of your Zoom screen. There are a couple of little speech blurbs with Q&A underneath, and we will try to keep an eye on that. I would ask people not to use the chat, which may not even be enabled possibly, because that one is a little bit confusing and it clutters up people's screens. But the Q&A will be taking on as we get toward the end of the session. I think that is most of the introductory stuff I have to do. So let me just quickly share my screen so you can see a little bit of this stuff. And if I can find the screen share button, which has mysteriously disappeared. Oh, it's under there. No, it's not under there. There it is. All right. So just to start with, here is the book that's coming out. It was originally due to come out today. So I was really hoping to sort of say, you're not going to believe this, but the book is literally available right now. However, 2021, having followed 2020, we know that all sorts of weird stuff can go on. And so the book has been delayed a little bit. It's now coming out at the end of this month on the 26th. So I know Philip is waiting with bated breath to actually get that physically out in front of folks. This is a lovely portrait by Annie Schlechter that's in the book. Pre-COVID haircut, I think. But you will see from the book itself and from our talk today that Philip and his whole family are all very much of a piece with his work. And there's a wonderful kind of unstudied casual friendliness. He has a highly Instagrammable husband whom you can find on Instagram, and two extremely Instagrammable dogs, Milo and Jacob. And Philip, maybe you want to talk a little bit about them. You were just telling me about the breed, which is an amazing combination of all sorts of things.
Absolutely. So again, I wanted to start by thanking you so much, Kyle, for having me in Boston Design Week, and I'm excited for anybody who's come to the talk as well, because I think it'll be a fun, interesting day. Yeah, our dogs. What can I say? I think our dogs are more famous than we are. Jacob and Milo are Ganaraskans. They're a Canadian breed. They Brett is a therapy dog, and they are, extremely, they're extremely positive in our life in every aspect. I mean, we sort of take them everywhere. They're part of everything that we do, and we've really designed our lifestyle sort of around our dogs, which sounds crazy, but we love them. They bring us a lot of joy, and I think that lots of people can sort of identify and relate to that.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things I like is they sort of, in their temperament and just in their looks, they kind of exhibit some of the same qualities that your work does.
Oh,
Because you're known for being friendly and relaxed, and yet kind of very stylish in a laid back kind of way, and really maximalist, but maximalist in a kind of a very livable fashion. So it's like your work doesn't feel crazy and cluttered and chaotic, and yet it's always extremely full, and there are lots of events going on, and every little detail you can look at, and it feels wonderfully integrated with the rest of it.
Well, I mean, thank you. I was going to say I'll take it. For us, I think I grew up in a household that was steeped in design, and for us, everything was sort of it was about living in our house, but also it was about living with beautiful things. And I had a really talented mother, and I had very talented aunts that kept beautiful homes. And it's interesting because that's just how we lived. And nothing was off limits. Nothing was too precious. I mean, we were taught from a very young age to live with things and to respect those things. We've never really thought any different about our dogs, in the sense that, we have a pretty layered house with lots of things in it, but nothing is off limits to our dogs. We don't have ourselves particularly a lot of indoor, outdoor fabrics and things like that. But for us, at the end of the day, it's really about living. And so, if that means, we have to wash their paws off when they come in from a walk in their dog wash, that allows them to go on all the furniture. It's a great Kips Bay. It's our Kips Bay room that they, in fact, were part of as well. And, to be honest with you, there was no real consideration or special consideration for the dogs, based on the fact that we, designed this space, and we just always envisioned that the dogs were going to be there during the course of the show with us, just like they are at home or anywhere that we live. So they definitely, they melded right into this Kips Bay Showhouse room.
Absolutely. I mean, in palette and everything. I mean, one of the things I actually particularly loved about, I mean, there's lots of things I loved about this room, but the amazing layering of the rugs on the floor was really special, I thought. And I wish
I guess the key for, I mean, like any Kips Bay Showhouse or any decorator showhouse for that matter, is the concept to be able to sort of create something, or have the complete freedom to be able to create something that's completely different and interesting and unique, that's representation of yourself, but that gets people's attentions. And for us, when we were doing that, we sort of applied the same sort of the same way that we look at our own houses. And when I say that, you can have a little bit more freedom or flexibility when it comes to sort of decision making. You can push the envelope a little bit further, and we wanted to definitely do that there. And I think part of the key was that we wanted to show people that you can really mix everything. And when I say that, from an antique Tabriz carpet to like a new custom embroidered carpet to a seagrassy bit, and layer those elements in such a way that they can complement one another, rather than fighting with one another. I know a lot of people made the comment that you did as well about the carpets, and for me, there were these incredible pieces, that were just really, really different, and not necessarily meant to go together, but we put them together because, it was interesting. People still talk about it, and I think that, there was a tie together between sort of a traditional and contemporary sort of feel within the space.
Yeah, very much like that. And here we is again, just so everybody can see it.
Yeah.
I mean, there are a number of ways I'd love to go from here, and any of them would work. I think one of the things that would be particularly good for the designers in our audience, and everybody else, is that, maximalism is something that could be mistaken for, just get a bunch of stuff that you love and put it all together in a room and it will mysteriously work.
Right.
And in fact, I mean, I won't name any names, but I've heard certain designers actually say something like that.
Yeah.
I'm a little dubious about that, because
I,
if
I
people are
don't
like
blame you
me,
because I
they
am
can
too.
like a lot of things that don't necessarily go together. And
Yeah,
so one of the amazing things about your piece or about your spaces is that no matter how chock-a-block they are with all kinds of stuff, it always feels harmonious. I don't see things feeling like they don't really belong together. I mean, do you want to talk a little bit, if you want to, can give away some secrets about
absolutely.
kind of like what you look at and what you think about when you do that kind of work?
For sure. And just so we're clear also, I mean, when it comes to secrets, let's say, for example, or the idea or the concept of something that we would go by that would be more technical or, sort of a scholastic approach, for me, like I think most designers or a lot of designers, I initially conceptualize, visually with sketching. I take the
Hmm.
space, I start to build a floor plan. And when I say that, like working within the floor plan that we have to work with, like in this case, I try to establish what it is that I'm trying to do here. And in this case, we were trying to create two sort of separate seating areas.
Right.
We were trying to create sort of a bit of a makeshift casual bar. We also were trying to create a games table area like that you could sort of, create different sort of moods and feels within this space. And that was like the first step with a floor plan. And once we sort of established that, I also look at things kind of in an old school, old fashioned way when I say that I'm not specifically governed by an exact size or an exact shape of something. I'm a little more organic than that, and so for me, it's about all the things that come after that. So really the plan is sort of the key basic sort of element that we start with. And then, I usually will start with perspective sketches for the rooms. I'll do different, elevations or sort of sections that I would sort of like to break down and take apart, where I start to add detail or shift things around to maybe develop a different concept of how we would hang artwork, how we would install lighting, how we would, those types of elements, all of which eventually gets articulated to a proper CAD drawing as well, that's to scale. But for me in the beginning, it's really about sort of, establishing sort of how the space is going to be used and putting that all together. And then I start with the pieces like everybody else also. I either start, if it's with a client, for example, I start with pieces that are existing. In this case, it was really about starting with, to be honest with you, upholstery that we could have done within, I think it was like 5 weeks. So that was one of the key elements. And to be honest with you, that could be a stipulation that you would work with a client in real life with as well. So we started sourcing. Cravat was amazing with us. George Smith was amazing with us. We had a number of different manufacturers that we worked with that we went to them to find out, number one, what they had in stock, if they had frames in stock, tried to figure out fabrics that would be in stock and apply those to various things, depending also if something was, being manufactured or produced in New York, or if it's going to be in the South, if it was going to be, on the other coast. And so we would then try to sort of put all those key elements together to be able to sort of facilitate, making decisions based on what is available. And, so it's a very fast paced sort of approach in something like this. But again, when it comes to sort of articulating how the room would be laid out, we do detailed elevations. A lot of the artwork was mocked up, in sort of color photoshopped elements that we could see how pieces were going to relate to other pieces. Always fabric swatches on the side of what that Photoshop document is, so we can sort of relate colors to the fabrics that are going to be in the space as well. And again, it's how we would approach anything, except for the fact that we're way more flexible when it comes to something like this. If something can't be framed on time, if something gets damaged in shipment, if something isn't available at the last minute, you have to be prepared to be able to swap something out. And that's, the approach we had for here. And in addition, what helped also is that we did have a couple of our own personal pieces that we threw into there, much like we did the first Kips Bay. I mean, some of the pieces of artwork in this space were already ours. But then, we also did add to it and borrowed from certain suppliers also. And actually commissioned things too. Like you can see there's a great painting of our puppies in there by Beth Runquist, who's an amazing artist in the US. You can also see the portrait of, the woman next to them. Also, she's sort of hidden by the lampshade. Another great artist, Rebecca Moses, who's a good dear friend of ours as well.
Hmm.
And a lot of these pieces have sort of entered into our collection also now, and if they weren't before. So yeah, at the end of the day, I think that it's definitely, there's the whole, educational sort of approach to it where everything is sort of the way it is, but at the same time, I'm very flexible and organic about how things move around and how pieces get added. Like, I mean, we found an amazing fixture from David Duncan Antiques, the beautiful rock crystal light fixture. And for us, we went to an amazing source in New York, Blanchfield, for the lampshades. And Lisa, who's like the most extraordinary person to work with, she's great because, you take her the piece, you decide what we can do quickly, what's going to look best on the lamp. And it's amazing to be able to work with people like that, to be able to sort of, articulate this vision and make it sort of work.
Yeah, well, it was definitely an amazing transformation, because I think, I can't remember whose blog it was on, but I remember seeing a picture of the empty space that you were assigned before you did it. And it was incredibly, you wouldn't know by the way it looks now, but it was really grim. And it was this lightless kind of long, low thing. And
it's interesting because this was on an upper floor in the house, one of the less grander rooms, in the sense that it had very low ceilings, lots of bulkheads, and but it did have a nice proportion. It was the entire width of the townhouse, which we were super lucky with, and we just worked with that. We added a lot of the architectural elements that you see here, the moldings, the plaster work. We did do a lot of the technical details to make the room have sort of a canvas to work with, to sort of build onto, just one more layer. But again, it's more about, for me, having an idea of what we're doing, building on that idea. And, when you have more time also, and if you have a client, you could be working with existing pieces too. We try to sort of structure things in such a way where there is a visual flow, and so even though this room is, listen, I've even heard people criticize the room where it's overwhelming to them, and it's like too much, and it's too intense, and it's too maximalist, and it's too this, and it's too that. And for me, that's like, everybody has their opinion, and that's fine. But for me, there is a visual continuity to how it sort of is arranged. And when I say that, how we've stacked certain pieces, how we've mixed certain pieces, we try to have like, sort of the major pieces, anchoring the space, but then off of that, we're adding, something that would be, classic to complement something that's classic, but then also something that's contemporary to contrast it as well, add a little bit of interest, add a little bit of life. And like I always say to all of my clients as well, it's about the personality in the space. It's about showcasing your personality. And it's about, and I guess this is definitely, showcasing, mine and my husband's personality, because a lot of them are ours. But, it's about, just that mix of things and having fun with it. But again, thinking about how things relate to each other is definitely key as well. You can see this, there's an amazing photograph from the Volts Art Gallery, sort of on the right there, that's of tulips. That's fantastic, by Nancy Richardson, who's an amazing photographer and very, very, talented. And her work is super graphic and feels very youthful and contemporary, and we've, mixed in like a great, vintage piece from the 1950s. You see in the back there, sort of the purple abstract piece, just sort of tie into that as well. And I'm also a big fan of keeping original frames on things that artists have had, or that people have framed things in, if you can. And so, I think a lot of the time there's an authenticity associated with pieces when you have that, versus trying to frame things to match, or trying to frame things to work with other pieces. I think that there's something about a beautiful old chipped gilded frame next to like a really simple raw, frame from the 60s that would just be like almost, with a shadow box detail on a big, abstract canvas. So I think there's something, honest about working with those pieces and how they sort of flow, versus trying to make it a little bit too thought out, so to speak, or too, predictable.
Yeah, well, and that's exactly what I think. Little kind of touches that are clever and useful, and yet they fit in perfectly. I mean, one of the things that really impressed me particularly is in this long, low room, which is actually quite formal. I mean, it's kind of a drawing room, it's got the game table and everything. And in that kind of space, normally you don't think about flush mount ceiling fixtures in this kind of a room, in a way. I mean, they don't feel, but you found some that are just perfectly attuned to the character of the space, and they work on that low ceiling. And it's just, every little thing like that is just great, and
Thank you.
I
Yeah,
just
I mean,
really admirable for
yeah,
me.
yeah, thank you. I
Um,
was gonna say
and
we really did try to sort of mix things up that way. And again, those are fantastic features from Urban Electric that they, did such an amazing job for us there. And we just wanted to add elements that wouldn't necessarily be predictable or expected, like a set of recessed lighting in here or a set of whatever, like you could do anything obviously. And we wanted it to be just a little bit different, a little bit unexpected.
Yeah, it definitely worked. I mean, there's a little thing I'd love to go back to. You had mentioned during some of that talking about kind of things came from your collection.
Yeah.
And in the book, there is a section where you talk about collections because you have been able to work with a lot of clients who have collections of wonderful stuff. And you say you don't like to get rid of a lot of the clients' things. You like to work with what they've got. And the fact that their
Not always.
personality, not always,
most of the
right?
time.
It could be the designer challenge is like take your client's most horrible piece and see if you can build a room around it, right? But yeah, so I mean, collections are clearly a big part of what you do, and in some cases, you probably do end up with clients who don't necessarily have collections of their own. And since their personality is for you such an important part of the finished product, how do you go about working with them to essentially assemble collections on their behalf? Is that something that comes to mind for you?
I mean, this is a great example that you've got here also, and happens to be a super personal one. But this is exactly how we'd approach something with a client. Most of our clients do come to us that have something, to work with. I'm not going to lie. Like, I think a lot of people are attracted to what I do with display and how we incorporate things that are personal into their spaces. But there definitely are instances where we have clients that have maybe a second or third project that would be, an additional residence that's maybe either a vacation house or, a city place versus a country place. And so, often in those situations, we don't necessarily have a whole bunch of things to choose from to put into that space because it is a new space. It's not something they already had something for. And so to your point, we do then have to sort of develop a collection with them. And so, in this instance, for example, we had two small Staffordshire dogs, and this is our own dining room here that Mark had inherited from his grandmother. And, I liked them, but I also didn't want just two Staffordshire dogs sitting on a chest of drawers or a side table, because I just didn't. I just thought that we could do something more interesting with it, And so this is a prime example where we took something where we had two of something, and then, over the course of like 4 or 6 months, we scoured auctions, we went through antique stores, we went through lots of different sites, sort of collecting pieces of Staffordshire. And even I think, 1 or 2 came from even travels here and there. And so for us, it was sort of amassing that collection, which was part of the process that we really enjoyed. And I think that once we sort of introduce that element to our clients, they start to understand and enjoy. And so we could take this something as simple as looking at what somebody does have, and possibly even taking that from another location and saying, look, like, you do have these beautiful, blue and white ginger jars. What's the story? And, we try to flush out and understand where they came from. And was it something that somebody purchased? Was it something that was inherited? Often the disparate or the one-offs or the things here and there that somebody has tend to have a story, and they tend to come from somewhere, like they were either inherited or a gift or something, but maybe not, like, it wasn't something that they necessarily, sought out, or that they, purchased specifically, themselves or individually. And so when you start to understand the story, like, if it was a piece of blue and white that was inherited by somebody, or if it was, something that has a sentiment or an attachment to it, we flush that out a little bit more. We explore it a little more. We say, look, like, do you like it? And they're like, well, I love how it makes me feel when I look at it, because it reminds me of my grandmother, per se, and then, we just simply ask, are you open to then adding to that? Like, could we then, look for some more pieces like that? And, it sounds crazy, but like, often we'll procure those things for clients. But then we get to the point also where a lot of our clients, they simply have the same confidence, and then they develop an interest and passion for it, so that if they're on holiday somewhere and they happen to see a piece of blue and white, if that's what they've decided to collect, that they are confident in picking up a couple pieces, and then they start to learn more about it. They start to learn, if it's something that's, has a Ming background, if it's something that's Delft, and it's interesting to see people. And not just, and it's not just in things, it could be in artwork, it could be an artist, it could be any of those things where somebody starts to develop this passion for something. And I get excited when I see that, because again, then it's just, it's like introducing someone to great wine, like that didn't really have exposure to great wine before. And then all of a sudden they develop this palate and interest and appreciation for it. And I think that that's what happens a lot of the time with our clients. So often, and even also young people, we start with some young people, younger clients, where they don't have a lot of things, but then, they will learn to sort of appreciate and understand what you can make from nothing almost, or making more of something.
Right. Have you ever had clients surprised by what you learned about them from looking at their stuff carefully? Like they had interests that they didn't even realize, or?
Absolutely. I mean, it's interesting because again, I often think, well, I think of how I am, and how I am is not necessarily the norm. And when I say that, I have I have a pretty deep appreciation for a lot of beautiful things, because I inherited that and I was exposed to that, and I was lucky to have those exposures. And for me, I think a lot of people, if you're not in the design industry and you haven't really, had a passion for design and studied design, I don't know, I'm not saying that every single one of our clients is impassioned with design, but I do feel like that every one of our clients starts to develop a passion for some aspect of design, and whether or not that's collecting something, or whether or not it's artwork or sculpture or something like that, or starts to have an appreciation for marquetry furniture, or on the other spectrum, something that's more contemporary and bespoke, where like an artisan is making a piece of furniture that's like one of a kind or one of six. Like I think that people start to get excited about that when they have more exposure to it, and I like to see that develop in people. It excites me, and I really do think that it's interesting, because I think a lot of people didn't necessarily have the time. People are busy, they're doing lots of things, and they think, often like doing a house is kind of like you tick off the list and you just keep going. We really try to build a relationship with that client, and we really try to encourage that client to build a relationship with their home, which sounds probably a little cheesy, but we all spend a huge amount of time in our homes. And I think that there's something to be said for being surrounded by things that make you feel good.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, another thing that I kind of leads on from what we were just talking about, and you referenced art briefly, and one of the things that I particularly like in this image that you've picked here, is you mentioned that the house had been inherited by your husband. And obviously, the paneling is very traditional, and it's got that amazing fireplace surround and the little fireplace insert, which are just wonderfully evocative of, a prior century, essentially. And then the Staffordshire dogs themselves, are about as traditional as you can get. It's kind of stock in trade for every antique dealer ever.
Absolutely.
And yet above that, you put a painting, which in a way is also referencing really older things, because it's very like kind of that wonderful marbleized paper that used to be in a lot of book bindings and things like that. Mm-hmm. But the idea of using that motif in the large scale as a piece of art in and of itself is really very modern, I think.
Totally. And
so you've introduced this bit of modern that still references all the older tropes.
Absolutely. And this is, so as you see in this sort of image here, we have like a super abstract contemporary piece of artwork that, is a huge juxtaposition between everything else, but it also does have all the qualities that you just described. Like, I mean, there is that sort of ode to that marbleized paper from, like the 20s. There's definitely a relationship between it and the fireplace, even though totally different, different times, different eras, different materials, different everything. There's a relationship within the color of those two things that it worked. And the Staffordshire dogs just breaks it up, and It just makes it kind of, the Staffordshire collection almost starts to feel modern in this case, just because of the way that it's juxtaposed or sort of transitioning between, a really historical looking, cast iron mantelpiece versus the contemporary abstract piece of art above it. And again, those are all things that are definitely thought about, and subtleties that we definitely explore, not just for ourselves, but with all of our clients. But, there is something about being able to to make things fresher, make things interesting, make things unexpected, but still being comfortable. You know, I mean, I always love to push the envelope when it comes to any of our projects, both contemporary and traditional and anywhere in between, to sort of, you know, push the envelope in different directions. You know, we're just in the midst of designing a super contemporary property for ourselves. And, you know, for us, I love the idea of introducing like a really spectacular, almost almost horrific piece of Baroque furniture in a very minimalist space with like, you know, like a terrazzo floor and white walls, you know, like, but
Right.
I just love the fact that, you know, also maybe because it's not as fashionable as it used to be, like, you know, Baroque pieces, there's something remarkable about those types of pieces of furniture. And I love the fact that they seem like they're going to come alive. And I just love the contrast of that. And this is, I mean, this is nothing new. This is things that you would see like Caliph Alto do like in the 70s and 80s, you know, like in a very contemporary white space with like round pillows and like a, you know, a Louis the 16th chest, you know, like for
Right.
me, I just like the idea of sort of not forgetting, I guess, respecting the past, bringing those elements back and moving them forward rather than everything just being the same and very, very much, you know, like a white interior with like the most beautiful, perfect contemporary furniture. There's something to be said with throwing in some bits and pieces that wouldn't have been expected, that would have been interesting, that definitely show somebody's personality and what they like.
Maybe it's time for a Victorian revival or something like that.
I mean, Victorian furniture has never been my favorite, but I'm not going to lie. I mean, we've worked with people who've had pieces, you know, that belong to museums, and we took pieces apart. And when I say that, like if there was a settee and two chairs, you know, the two chairs, you know, were reupholstered in a more contemporary-ish fabric and sort of put into a guest room, and the settee was used sort of in a mudroom area where I think it was upholstered in burlap, just to give it a contrast to what it was, but to again make more of it. I mean, and again, we had to definitely edit out a lot of those. Were inherited by the client. They wanted to use them for sentiment, but you know, a lot of the pieces I was like, look, we either going to have a Victorian house or we're going to have a house that's you that has Victorian elements in it, you know? So
Yeah.
yeah, there's a fine line.
Yeah. Well, there's actually in your discussion a minute ago, you mentioned that you're doing a more contemporary thing for your next house. And there's actually a wonderful section in the book that I think also goes with that idea of going a little bit against the grain, and it's something that people might not have considered. And you talk specifically about what you call modern maximalism.
Definitely.
And it's sort of like people wouldn't necessarily think of trying to do maximalism in a modernist or contemporary way.
Mm.
And you make a real case for that. I was wondering if that's something you want to talk a little bit about today.
Definitely. And so for us, the key to sort of, you know, what we think of as maximalism is the more is more, period. Right. And I think that you know, it's, you know, definitely, you know, the same amount of thought, the process, the direction, all those things are approached the same way, in my opinion. But I feel like for a more modernist aesthetic and a more modern maximalism sort of aesthetic is essentially still trying to work with as many things as you love. And in fact, you can see in this instance, I mean, for me, it's easy and quick, but from our old Kips Bay room that you were showing earlier, this is a great French landscape here that's in this beautiful sort of traditional gilded frame that's, you know, at the back of this image. And we've paired it with two really contemporary abstract black and white canvases. You know, we've also thrown in a couple of Wedgwood pieces to the left of that on shelves. And I guess the point that I'm getting at is that we didn't want to get rid of things. You know, we love beautiful artwork. We love things that are inherited. And so this is also then a mixture of things that are a little bit cleaner, I would say, like, you know, the fabric patterns here and the overall palette of the space is completely neutral. I think everything is either white, off-white, or beige, or that sort of caramel or tawny color. But if you look closely, there are no pillows that are in the same fabric. Some of them are in fact antique textiles that we've repurposed into pillows because, you know, why not? You know, and again, the key here is that we're still applying all of those layers that we would in a very traditional space, but this is it's a little bit more edited. It's a little bit more curated. It's definitely a lot more thought has to go into making sure that there's going to be a proper flow visually and still feel fresh and modern, but, you know, be able to surround yourselves with, you know, great artwork and, things that are traditional and contemporary. Again, in this space, like most of the pieces are extremely contemporary, very clean looking. The lines are very clean also. But again, we've taken like a great vintage, Italian lamp, floor lamp that has like a lucite shelf and it's chrome. And we've, created, again, this is from Blanchfield, this beautiful custom shade that is very much like a European shade that's it's very flouncy, it's organic looking, and it's a total contrast to the harder edges that you're seeing in a lot of the space. But it's nice to be able to do that. You can see on the far left-hand side, we have a swing arm lamp that has a really detailed embroidered shade also. So again, you're having things that are touched by hand. You're having these quality elements that would definitely be more traditional in vein, but I have no problem mixing them into a contemporary space and layering those things one after another as well.
Right. And, all of the fabrics and things, as you said, are kind of more monochrome, and it's more of a color
Definitely.
block effect than it is
Absolutely.
patterns like it would have been in one of your other rooms.
Totally, but when you go in there, there's the equal amount of interest. Like every cushion has, sometimes more than one trim on it. There's different details, different edging details. There's different shapes. There's different sizes. Again, like I said, some of them are antique textiles that have been made and repurposed into toss pillows. There's an old carpet that's been cut up and put into toss pillows that's been bleached, and we've done different effects and details on these elements, as well as new fabrics too. But the thing is that it gives the eye this incredible visual interest, and there's always something going on and to look at in a detail that I love. But it's not, in my opinion, it's not as overwhelming as it could be, say, in our Kips Bay show house, which veers to definitely more of a maximalist feel versus a more modern aesthetic.
Right. Yeah, but again, really carefully diming down to the binding of the underlying rug there.
Totally. I mean, this essentially, this space, if you broke it down and removed all of the furniture from here, this is essentially the show house room space that we started with, which was a blank white canvas with a whole bunch of bulkheads and low ceilings.
Right.
And so, this just happens to be in a very contemporary building in Toronto. And rather than trying to make it more than it was, we just used it as a blank canvas. We kept everything very clean and very minimal. And like I said, everything is very, very controlled, and it's definitely very curated, but it overall, it gives you a very simplified feel to it, even though there's lots of layers in that space.
Yeah, and I should mention for the viewers, in the book, there are some really lovely close-ups of all those pillows, so you can really see.
It's true. I mean, we've tried to make examples of a lot of the details that we have throughout the spaces in the book also, just to sort of help break the rooms down.
Well, do you want to take a minute and talk about the book a little bit, since we're all here?
I would love to, absolutely. So
we'll move on to questions after that.
I have a new book almost out that's been delayed due to shipping, like everybody's books this fall, but we're super excited. We're super excited that it's with Rizzoli. We had an amazing team that we worked with, which was outstanding. You had mentioned earlier Biddy, or Elizabeth Blitzer, who's been phenomenal with us. She's a good friend, very dear friend, and an incredible PR person in New York. And then Jill Colin also, and Mel Powell in her office. The two of them were this dynamic team that really did make all of this happen with Rizzoli as well. And just were incredibly encouraging to push us forward, to push the envelope, to sort of create what we have here, which is, I think a book that I'm super proud of. And, it's a great monograph of the work that we've accomplished to this point. And, I was super excited that Rizzoli was, just as excited about producing a book as we were. And, it's a dream to have them do it. But yeah, I mean, the process was, it was incredible and crazy also. And when I say that, we really did get our book deal literally right before COVID started. And so for us, this has been a complicated project, to say the least. I mean, the amazing thing is that during the process and when we were sort of going through everything, Rizzoli and the editors at Rizzoli saw some of the work that my husband does, who's in advertising, and they were so they were so pleased with what Mark had put together for some of the conceptual items for us that, they engaged Mark to design the book, which was a huge gift for us on so many levels, but especially because the fact that, we had been locked down in our house in Nova Scotia for a year, working from home like everybody, but being able to really, go through every single step, every detail, every, revision, every edit, looking at everything with a fine tooth comb over and over and over again. And it was, it was amazing to be able to do that and have the flexibility and freedom to do that. And, I realize now after the fact how much of a gift it really was, and, how great our team was throughout that entire process, to be able to work through that, from the editors like Andre at Rizzoli and Charles Myers and all the different people that were involved in this book. It was really, really, it made it a gift during that time to be able to do it, and we're super excited about the release of it, and we're super excited about what people are going to think about it, because I think that it's something different that's coming out, and I think a lot of people will be very curious to see how we approach things, which is not the typical trying to make a specific look or a specific sort of style, let's say, but more about creating sort of personalities for people, and building on what they have, and making that the statement in our spaces.
Yeah, no, I think people are going to love it, and especially in these days, with a lot of design books, it's sometimes hard to find one that really is kind of serious and lays out a lot of interesting thoughts and questions, and kind of grapples with ideas that designers face all the time. And so
totally, yeah, no. So I think I'm excited. I think that I think people will be very pleased when they see it.
Good. Well, just to let everybody know, as we mentioned, that book is going to be available. Well, I mean, you can pre-order it now on Amazon.
It's totally available pre-order,
so
and
really
obviously it's available on Amazon. I mean, we also would love for anybody that can to support a local bookstore. You can also pre-order at local bookstores also. It's going to be released at the end of this month, the 26th of October, and you'll be able to physically buy it, in a bookshop. But yeah, if you can support local, we love that as well. But again, you can definitely pre-order it on Amazon. We have our first book signing, which I'm super excited about, coming up in December 1st in New York, at the Rizzoli sort of flagship there, and we're doing a co-book signing with the incredible, formidable Bunny Williams, who was the forward.
Who wrote the introduction for you?
Yeah, she's a dear friend, and she's a very special person, and we're so excited about that, and looking forward to that. Looking forward to actually being able to sort of meet people, and and get to sort of experience how they experience our book.
And for the designers in the crowd, you can also know that it's a very handsome looking book, and it'll make a perfect prop in your own photo shoots because it'll go almost anywhere.
Absolutely. Listen, it's also I like to think it's the perfect Christmas gift.
Absolutely, that too. Well, before we get too late, I want to make sure we do have time for questions, because I know a lot of our viewers will have stuff they'd love to ask you.
Absolutely.
So if people can use the Q&A button for that, and just queue them up, I will start going through the list. The first question is actually from one of the organizers, Robert Four, who is curious about where you source your art for a lot of these things.
Totally. So to be honest with you, I'm a little addicted to collecting myself, and so because of that, I'm always looking through auctions, both North American and international auction houses. I look for a lot of specific artists, so I follow different people in different auctions when they come up. But for me, a lot of the time what we do is we'll introduce a lot of our clients to art shows, different events that are held across the US, Canada, even things in Europe, from PAD to, the International Art Fair in Toronto. There's great shows in New York as well that we go to, Art Basel, different things where you can sort of expose people to lots of things at one time. But again, I also love to source locally. And I know everybody says that, but what I like about sourcing locally, and when I say locally, I mean, when we have somebody who's doing a project in Florida, or if we have somebody who's doing a project in the Caribbean, or if we have somebody who's doing a project in Italy, for that matter, we like to sort of source something locally also, or as many pieces as possible for our own learning, in the process of things too, but to introduce an element that is local in spaces, because it's kind of nice to be in a house in, the Caribbean and be able to see not just beautiful things from elsewhere in the world, but also some beautiful local artists as well. That, again, we have clients all over the place, from younger to older, people with blue chip art collections to people who are just starting out and learning how to collect in the very beginning. And so for me, there's lots of incredible original artists out there. There's the old saying about starving artists, but there's amazing young people that you can help sort of support as well by finding pieces that are within a local marketplace where a house may be that we do work in.
Yeah. I mean, do you have certain go-to galleries or people like that? I mean, certainly for that first staircase at Kips Bay, I mean, you had to come up with how many hundred pieces within a few weeks? I mean, that must have been amazing.
Absolutely. I mean, well, so a lot of those pieces were ours in the staircase, but we did add to those pieces. And I mean, again, in that instance, we had some great galleries in New York. I mean, David Duncan was incredibly generous with a lot of pieces, lending us some things for that show as well. And but the key is that, again, wherever we do anything, we're sort of open to anything. And again, I'm looking at, a lot of the time I'll look at Invaluable, which is a great source to connect you to 1 million auctions across the globe. It gets a little addictive, and you can be up in the middle of the night sometimes with alerts about things that are happening in Australia, but it's what I do and what I love. And so when I'm looking, I also look for clients at the same time, because I can't help myself. We just found a great piece that I was potentially going to purchase for myself, but then I thought, oh, it's so great for a client. So I sent it to the clients. They loved it. We procured it for them. But, it's a passion of mine. And, when I see something, I either want to give it a home, like in our own home, or I want to try to find somebody that I work with that we can give it a home for, that's, that respects the piece.
Nice. Any more questions? I'm surprised we're not getting bunches of them, but maybe you've covered everything so beautifully, nobody has anything left to ask, which is wonderful. Well, I will kind of, just kind of on a personal level. I mean, you mentioned in the book, in the introduction, that you talk a little bit about your, growing up in a family that was going back and forth between a little town in Ontario and LA.
Yeah.
And how various people in your family kind of influenced what you do and your take on kind of what a home environment can be like. What about this business, after all of these years and as much work you've put into it, what are the things that really delight you and make you want to get up and do this every day?
I have to say, I really do have to say it's the, and this is again going to sound cliche, but it's the clients. And when I say the clients that develop, the clients that start to develop this passion for design. Like we have people, I have a client who's a pretty substantial art collector now in their own right, who will send me, like a DM, or they'll send me like a little note on something and say, oh my God, I just saw this. What do you think of this? And I love, listen, I'm attracted to people that are like that, because I love being engaged with art, and I just think that's fantastic. And again, I really do like it when people are interested and they develop this interest. And I love seeing someone develop this interest, because it's kind of like, and it sounds crazy, but it's kind of like childlike, like somebody gets this high and this euphoric feeling from finding something that they really, really, really like, and it's something that they didn't do before, and it's something that they weren't necessarily exposed to before, how they approach things before. And I really like that. I mean, there's something about that makes me super happy. And again, I love to create or help create environments with people and collaborations where, they spend a lot of time in their houses, and I really want them to enjoy every aspect of their houses. Like I love to introduce them to touched by hand things that are handmade from all over the globe and locally as well. I like to introduce them to artwork. I like to introduce them to things that maybe they didn't see before, they hadn't noticed before, they hadn't had an interest before. And there's just something about, developing that relationship, because that's what it is really. At the end of the day, it's a intimate relationship that you develop with someone, or a family for that matter, where you sort of move them forward into like the next phase where they didn't really maybe use their house or appreciate it as much as they thought they would now. And now they love that, and they love the process. And we have clients that have also done other projects just because they love the process so much, because it was so much fun and they enjoyed it so much, they learned so much, and it becomes a passion for them.
That's great. And just the fact that you can be involved in this process for so long, and it kind of is meaningful for both you and the clients, I think,
It's
is a
a
wonderful
gift.
thing.
I mean, I often joke that I have the best job in the world because it doesn't really even feel like a job. Like it sounds crazy, but it's like I wake up thinking to myself, I can't believe like how amazing it is that I get to go to these places and see these things and be part of building something. And I don't mean just physically, but building sort of metaphorically also like this lifestyle with somebody. I really like it.
Well, we are grateful that you took the time and were willing to share this with us today.
Well, thank you very much.
For everybody, before the hour ends, because I know people have other events they need to get off to, so I don't want to take us over time. But I hope everybody will virtually applaud Philip for a really wonderful talk today. I hope you will go out and either out into a bookstore or onto your computer to a virtual place and get the book. We did have one question from somebody who chose to remain anonymous saying, how about a discount for all of us on the book? But I will answer that. How about we just all continue to support the publishers and designers who make these books possible?
Absolutely.
And without people buying and paying for the books, you wouldn't have so many of them. So I will,
sure.
Being a journalist and a person in publishing, I will come out definitely on that side of the question.
As you know, there's a huge amount of work between not just design work, but the photographers and everything from the people that are all involved on every single level, that there's, it takes years to produce books, and there's a huge amount of effort and cost involved in doing them.
Absolutely. And so it's well worth keeping that up, because
totally,
we need things to fill our shelves and just pull out and enjoy a lot. So again, on behalf of Boston Design Week, I just want to thank Robert Four and Tony Fusco, and special thanks to Philip Mitchell and all the people who helped him make the book. Thank you to all of you for taking time out of your afternoon to join us for this. I hope you've enjoyed the couple weeks of Design Week programming that have already happened and are enjoying this final week also. For myself, Kyle Hoepner, I just want to say thank you, and have a lovely rest of your afternoon, everybody. Take care.
Thank you very much, everyone. I appreciate it.